Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of the No Ego podcast. And this season, I am just bringing you leaders and experts I find fascinating, interesting, and really are multiple points of validation. That's one thing for me to put my research out there and my work. But what I love about the work we're doing is right now we're seeing multiple points of validation for many of the things we're recommending to you to evolve as a leader. So today I'm bringing Adrian Koehler to the mic. And what first piqued my interest, so we haven't met before. I checked into his work, love his work. But what first piqued my interest is that one of his many lives, he was a pediatric intensive care specialist for my Chicago folks at Children's Memorial, and then has had many lives, whether it be ministry, coaching, founder of his own leadership coaching and consulting services, and also as a podcaster and all of that. So I won't get into a lot of his pedigree. He has amazing pedigree. But welcome, Adrian. I'm so glad that you have joined me. I know my listeners are going to absolutely benefit from our conversation today.
Oh, you're so kind. Sai, so great to be here. Thanks. Thank you. I
You are
already
welcome.
love the quick moments of getting to know you before we pushed record, and can't wait for this conversation.
Love it. Love it. How does one go from pediatric intensive care intensivist to to helping the world globally? You have so many great clients. Was that a difficult decision? I ask this because so many of my healthcare people are like, should I stay? Should I go? I don't want to weigh them anyway. I don't want to weigh in because we need people in healthcare. What happened in that transition for you? What drove that?
So I'll try to be brief on the historical stuff, but I never wanted to stay, to be honest. Like when I was like in undergrad, I was a pre-med kid, and then it finally hit me that I don't want to do this. Like and I think I would have eventually kind of enjoyed, especially where medicine's going now. I think I would have enjoyed the possibilities of being a doctor, and there's much more of an entrepreneurial flavor coming in now.
Yeah.
But back then, like going to school for that long and then kind of being, at least the stories I heard and the people I met, I don't like to be that objectively engaged. I like what you're doing. I like research, and I'm a total nerd. I love research, but I like being in the trenches.
Yeah.
And so, serendipitously or providentially, whatever you want to call it, at the time, my roommate in college, he was a nursing major, and his father was a nurse in the ER in Gary, Indiana, which meant he got some cool stories.
Yeah.
Of pretty crazy situations. So anyway, I became a nurse, not because I wanted to be a nurse necessarily. I knew there was an opportunity, and my parents liked the idea of like being a nurse in the nursing shortage back then. This was early 2000s. And but I did know a couple things. I knew I loved medicine. I loved the human body. I love biology, and my brain remembers all that stuff really quickly. But I also knew I loved people, and I loved helping people thrive. However, I could have defined that like when I was young. So I just became a nurse because, I can go do it whenever. So it gave me like optimal flexibility and a platform to making the type of difference I wanted to make with people. But I didn't like have a huge vision for, I want to do this and do it this way for the next 10, 20, 30 years or anything like that. That was never in my view. I knew I wanted to go travel, which you could do that. And I knew I liked the work, and I knew I'd be good at it. So I did that. And then I didn't even know where I was going to work. It's like in college, I was dating a girl my whole senior year. She lived in Chicago, and I done an internship in this inner city thing in Chicago. And I loved that and fell in love with her. And that took me to Chicago, and I interviewed lots of places. And I only did pediatrics because I interviewed there, and it was distinct. It was like one of those things where I'd done all the interviews, and I like interviewing, and it's kind of fun. And the gal, Liz was her name, who was the manager of what they call the resource team, where they let like you're like a utility player. So you come into the hospital and they place you wherever. And this is all standalone children's hospitals. So it's all pediatrics. But anyway, she walked me to the front door, and I acted like I left. I like faked it. I faked like I left and I let her walk away, and then I snuck back in. And then I went back up to all these floors, and all I did was just watch. And I watched the joy of these nurses that would engage with these family units, which is very distinct, in the medical world, and
Yeah.
like dealing with, an adult, a 40-year-old that, that has, a heart attack or something. Usually it's him or maybe his wife or something like that. But when you have a family there, what an interesting situation where the kid usually, 99.9% of the time didn't earn whatever's happening to them, because it's not like life
Yeah.
choices got them there, some accident or something genetic. And then there's a mom and a dad, both healthy in the physical sense, but emotionally as wrecked or more wrecked than they've ever been. And that need for someone who could come in and illuminate the situation first off, like what's really happening here and what do we know and what do we not know, and add some education so they can kind of calm down. Usually moms were this is just stereotypically speaking or generalistically,
Yeah.
moms were kind of frantic because their baby was sick, and they're usually used to like kind of being the head of that. And
And
dads were
dads
usually
wanted to fix it
dad
in the
dads were
traditional.
shut. That's right, and dads were kind of pissed but quiet about it. And so anyway, like getting, helping each of them to like find their spot and find out how to be supportive and how to be effective as like obviously managing care, but then also being with their child at this very distinct, challenging situation. So I really dug that. So that's when I got out, and then I in the resource team, which is a big honor. They'd only let a couple of us new grads go in and be on the resource team because we don't know anything, but we can just fake it until we learn. And but it was a big gift to me because you got to show up on the floor. Now maybe I'm only there for 4 hours or 8 hours, so I got to like, maybe I'm on the neurology floor, or infectious disease, or the cardiology, or the oncology, or whatever it's going to be. I know just enough to be dangerous. And I got to go in, get to know the players, get to know the situation, understand the doctors, understand the diagnoses, understand everything. And then you got to do that. And then you got to dump it and then go to the next floor and do it again. So it really helped me. It was a gift to me in my own leadership, kind of connecting the
Totally.
dots here at, thinking on my feet, reading people, knowing how to build rapport rather very quickly, because I needed their help, the floor's help, in order to like be effective. Um, so it was great for me, but I never really wanted to go, like stay and do it. I just liked the work, and so
Yeah.
I'd come from a spiritual background. Like I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Illinois and very kind of Bible belty. Part of that worked for me, most of it didn't. The belief system worked fine for me. It was the orthopraxy that was the issue for me. It was like how it works out in humans' lives and who they become, and culturally, when you put a quote unquote church together, all the human dysfunction that shows up in that.
Yeah. When the
And
ego takes and morphs what this beautiful belief system is where
right on.
we run into challenge.
Right on. And even just the massive invitation of dogmatism, like that it is this way, and I know the way it is, and here's why, especially if I've got like an old scripture behind me, and but the unwillingness to get that, oh, it's my view of these things. Like,
Yeah.
people have been viewing this scripture for, I don't know, a few thousand years, and there's lots of diverse thought about it. But it's always so inviting to be dogmatic, like this is the way it is, and here's why, and I cherry pick what I believe and go out to prove what I think, and then build a whole lifestyle around that, instead of really being open handed and being really curious and really being fully educated on, and really holding the space of like, here's what I know and here's what I don't know. And faith is a lot more
Yes.
about being comfortable with what I don't know. And am I
So
okay with
true.
being
I want to
comfortable
mark a
with what I
couple of
don't know?
things because it does really play into what we talk about in leadership. I love what you're saying. One of the things in leadership we really have to watch out for is a cheap way out of cognitive dissonance is that polarized
Mm,
thinking where
yes.
you forget that multiple things can be true at the same time. And so many of us as leaders were taught mastery. Like what should I do when this happens? And then I will do that. And then, here's how people should act. And what we're talking about for a modern leadership competency is getting as
Hmm.
fluent in the mystery
Amen.
as you are in the mastery. So I tingle when you're saying what you're saying, because even in communications, change management, we teach, find out and tell people all the knowns. And, I recommend you have a list of three. Here's what we know, and that could change. We could disprove some of this. Here's what we don't know
Hmm.
yet. And then the third column, here's what we may never know. And
Right.
that came from my social work days. I loved the work of alleviating suffering and helping people, just like you did. Like, I loved that work. And as I got my master's in health administration and I moved up and I was that senior VP, and all we did was like budget and think service lines. And I'm like, I am out of here. This just is not where my heart is at. My heart is in managing energy to how we could. And
Hmm.
let's help hope make a comeback. That was just like my heart, and
Yes.
many great healthcare administrators out there. The good news is you and I were both there in the 80s and 90s. The good news is that's coming back to be a more holistic view for those in those
Hmm.
positions. But it wasn't for us in the 80s and 90s. It was very quickly could get to be like run the business, leave your heart behind.
Right on. Right on. And what a tragedy.
Yeah,
Really, what a tragedy for the sake of patients and patient outcomes. I mean, we know that like a compassionate person at the bedside has significant effects on physiological outcomes.
yeah,
Because we know, the mood and the thinking of the human generates a whole different level of possibility for even their own immune system, let
yeah.
alone their own motivation that might get them up and exercise or eat better and I mean, it's got a cascading effect. So yeah, I mean, and I eventually I would see way too far too often that, healthcare providers, if they didn't take care of themselves, they would just become really crusty and end up becoming really the opposite of how they started. And I have compassion for them because the system isn't set up really for their own self care, whatever you want to call it. I mean, they asked me to like write like in like the nursing newsletter thing, like the spirituality column or whatever, which was always hyper relational for me. Spirituality and and human relationships are always fused together. Um, so really talking about how to connect with your patients, but all first you got to connect with yourself. And because otherwise, I mean, you could fake it and like go play a role or go put on a persona, which is probably fine for them. But over time for you, you become so dry that, people then become objects. Like the problem patient or the problem family, quote unquote, becomes a problem to me, and I show up in that relationship. And what a bummer. What a bummer for them, of
Yes.
course, but then what a bummer for you. It's like now I am just a tool. So I always feel for folks that are in those really high traffic um, fields, and anybody, we can objectify anyone, but it's just a common tragedy. And something else you're saying, we end up, so we at my firm Take New Ground, um, we've surveyed and used a ton of leadership assessment tools, as you do, like all these personality assessments. We don't use any of them now except for one, and the reason why we use it is because it views leadership in paradoxes, which is to
Ooh,
this
I love it.
point.
Which one do you use? I don't use many. We believe they kind of just measure what flavor the ego shows up in. like,
Yes.
like none of them, if you take them on as an identity, is like the best. But I love showing leadership in paradoxes. Which one do
Yeah.
you
It's
use?
it's called the Harrison assessment.
Okay,
It's
I'm
it's
not
not well
familiar. I
used.
will.
Yeah. That's part of the bonus is like nobody's got their preset. Oh, I took this 5 years ago. Nobody ever
Yeah,
says that. Harrison assessment. I'll nerd out for the nerds here. This guy, Dan Harrison, PhD in psych, PhD in statistics, he ended up utilizing the data and the viewpoint that the Strengths Finder ended up being built on, which is what he termed the enjoyment performance theory. And it just goes simply that if someone, so human beings follow their preferences, period. Mammals follow their preferences. What do we want? What do we like? What do we prefer? We tend to follow those things. And those things, not only do we follow them like an action, we actually see them quicker based on,
yeah.
because it just shows up. Whatever I like shows up on my radar rather quickly. So most of us don't have enough language for our preferences, though, because
So true.
we
And
don't
that it comes
think.
up in boundary setting. A lot of people think boundaries are just my non negotiables or like my limits. And I'm like, boundaries are your preferences, your desires,
Right on.
your pleasure seeking. And most people, you're absolutely right, have really limited self reflection around that or language around that.
Right on. So it gives a really clean, very thorough view of what your preferences are, and then it breaks down. I won't go into too far. We could talk offline about it. For people that are
Totally.
interested in Harrison, hit me up and we'll talk about it. But for this conversation, there's several reports. One of them is this paradoxical leadership report, where essentially they take 23 of those traits and put them in these 12 paradoxes. One of them's on there twice. And so you can imagine like the opinions paradox, for example, which is both your preference for being certain of your own opinion, is the y-axis. The x-axis is your preference for being open and reflective, like open to other people's ideas and reflective on other people's ideas. And so we all sit on that graph somewhere, where how certain we are of our own opinion and how open and reflective we like to be. And if we're highly certain and not open, we're dogmatic. If we're hyper open and reflective and not certain at all, then we're inconclusive, because it just
Yeah. And
I'm always just taking a
self-abandoning.
poll.
Yeah. I would
Right on.
say a lot of the external locus of control
Right on.
work on that. This sounds, fascinating. So I'll take the offline, but if my listeners are interested in that, we'll let them know how to get a hold of you. You made me
Yeah.
think of something. I have of late, a lot of my personal work. I get CEUs, and has a lot to do with, being trauma informed, and also some of the use of psychedelics. But I think for so many healthcare professionals is we disassociate. Most of us are kind of attracted into the profession, probably out of some of our own trauma. For my healthcare folks, a lot of us, have our own trauma, which one of the ways we do well with our trauma is we go to help others. But when we disassociate, we also self abandon. And I think that we
Hmm.
try and get through these really busy moments disassociating. So we self abandon. But what that ends up doing is like this mass abandonment that is happening for the patients when they need us, or for our colleagues when they need us. And so
Yes.
one of the things I'm coaching a lot on is how do you somatically, for leaders, get back in your body, stop the disassociation, use that as good information, not self-abandoned, and then not abandon others. And it just really made me think of that concept I haven't really told listeners about, that we're studying right now. But
Yeah. Well, that shows up in one of these paradoxes on the Harrison assessment, which is really, it's called mutual help, which is like asserting for your own needs and then helping others, yeah, hit their goals. And so most people I work with have a really high helping others score. Like, I want to help other people because they're leaders, and it's also kind of become the servant leader thing, like as a concept, has become really
yes,
popular.
servant leaders can quickly
Yeah.
become codependent leaders, but
Well, yeah, and the one of the cool things about this assessment, it shows what happens when people are at rest, like what their regular score is, their static score is, or their kind of their default score, I'll say, and then it shows what happens when they're under stress. And most of us are under stress most of the time. Especially, I work with mostly founders of companies, so, and like fast moving entrepreneurial cultures. And if you've got this long on helping others, like high preference for helping others, and you don't assert for your own needs, which looks really good to other people, right? Especially in the short term.
yeah,
They're
there's a
like, wow,
lot
I
of
like
rewards for that.
a lot of rewards for that. I was a pastor for many years, so I know that game, or that, that way of being. If I'm really long on helping others and short on asserting for my own needs, in stress, you actually will flip. So you naturally are self-sacrificing, long on helping, short on asserting, and you're in this self-sacrificing quadrant. Picture, those that are listening, bottom right, because you're long on the x-axis, short on the y-axis. Under stress, though, you flip up into the top left quadrant, which is you become dominating. And everybody knows this, where it's like, I'm helping, I'm helping, I'm helping. I eventually I feel taken advantage of, and then
Yeah,
I'll
I
flip under
overgive, and then I
stress.
become self-righteous,
And
and
then that's right. And then I finally end up, not consciously and not thoughtfully, really flipping to being really dominating. And then you actually really betray and hit people out of nowhere. And all of a sudden, because you've been holding on to something for 6, 9 months, a year, and you haven't been saying something, and you end up really betraying the culture, betraying the person, because you really go off the end. And there can be some catastrophic results to that. People get fired, that kind of thing.
yeah,
But yeah, that's one of those paradoxes, one of those just tensions to manage, which is like, how do I stand for myself be aware of myself. Step one, as you're talking about, like getting back in my body. What's really going on for me? What do I really want? What do I really need? And that's not selfish. I mean,
Right.
it is from the self, but my job is to manage myself, and my job is to make sure my needs are met so that I can get for me, so I can get out of the way.
Yeah, to
Like, because I
self-regulate, which is
right
a
on.
fantastic concept because I'm loving the paradox. I'll check more into that because anytime you identify a spectrum, the way to transcend that spectrum, so you're not dictated, to find the and in that is through really self-reflection and intentionality,
Right on.
um, which
Right on.
I just think is so important. So many folks confuse generosity and overgiving, and Anne Lamott said giving can be the sunny side of control. Like if you're giving and it has motive or expectation, then that's not necessarily giving. Which I think is just all kinds of new stuff that we're entering into leadership with. You can't ignore your own evolution as a self-regulated adulting human. And for a long
Mhm.
time, we've given people power that have not had the ability to self-regulate, or they haven't done the evolutionary, the inner work. And
Yes.
those days are over. Like in our modern workplace, the many ways we're called to lead and the collaborative nature of our work, you just can't lead people where you haven't been, in my opinion. So
Yeah.
it's just, I love that you're really helping build those insights. I find that so many leaders, if they would just go inside and be intentional and then um, just act out of that. So for me, I talk a lot about wisdom. Forging wisdom is like what you're doing inside for your evolution. And then the more wisdom you form, the more you can walk through the world more skillfully and more lovingly.
Mhm.
And so I see people now forming more wisdom, but there's a block between walking through the world more skillfully. And a lot of times it comes down to fear. And I know you talk a lot
Mhm.
about fear and courageous
I
leadership.
do.
And what are like either some of the sources of fear, or what are the common fears leader have, or like how do you help leaders push through that fear? I've coached people for a long time and they're like, I know, I know, I know. I'm like, then what needs to happen for this to be how you move through the world differently? Like
Yeah.
how do you work with
Yeah.
that, Adrian?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure your listeners that are loyal, are really, attuned to some of these conversations. So I might be repeating some of the previous people or your thoughts on it. But, here's kind of my view on things. First off, it's good to ask ourselves some questions about the nature of fear itself. And, we typically moralize feelings like that we shouldn't have them or there's
Yes.
something wrong with having them, first off, instead of like realize, at least for me, feelings are like the wind. I don't know where they're coming from. I don't know how long they'll be here, but they're here. They have effect. And I can also respond to them in a way that they have the right effect, right?
Yeah,
Or,
they're good information. It's like I tell
they're good
people, feel your
information.
feelings. Don't always trust your feelings. Like they're good information.
Right on. Yeah. In my office, I used to have a sign up that said, my feelings are only indicator lights. They're not mile markers or signposts.
Nice.
Meaning that they're indicator lights. Like I was just thinking, like the check engine light on my car. It's saying something. My feelings are saying something, and it's good to listen to them and vet them out because they've got for me, fear in particular. I always tell myself that listen to the fear long enough to hear its concern. There's a concern under there that's probably called wisdom. If I want to get connected to so it's kind of like you got to squeeze it or like look under it, for example,
I
metaphorically
love
speaking.
that. I love that. I
And
often say, like, sit with it until it tells you its name. Like,
there you
we're
go.
so
There you
quick to
go.
judge and name things externally, but we're not very like good at sitting with it until it tells you its name. Is it grief? Is it fear? Like, what is it?
Right on. Right on. So I would honor fear first off because it
I
needs to tell
love
it's
them.
it's here to tell you something, and it's your body's mechanism of looking out for trouble, and it might be true or it might just be existential. Either way, though, it's worth listening to for if nothing else.
You
Otherwise,
can
it'll
trust
run your
yourself.
life.
Your feelings can trust that you'll at least pay attention.
That's right. I'm going to open the door. Once again, I use metaphors a ton, but for my head, it's like the door knocks and there's fear at the front door, and I can decide, do I want to invite them in for tea or not? It's like, but I get to decide if they get to come in or not. But I can listen to them, and so people would rather not ever be in fear because it's usually like a sensation I don't enjoy. But really, usually I don't like how I behave after fear, instead of like, so I see fear as the enemy instead of like, oh, fear is a gift to me, like there is some concern here and I'll listen to it. Um, so that's the first thing, is really honor the experience, and not give the keys or not make decisions based on it, like you were saying, or like I was saying on that sign on the wall. It's not like a signpost like, oh, I'm scared, so take it right. Or I put the whole mile marker thing in there because I'm a grown ass man over here, 43 years old. Like I ought not be so insecure at 43. Well, I don't know, man. Um,
It's a human
you're,
condition, last I
it's a
checked.
human condition, and I'm venturing and I'm doing new things all the time, and taking big leaps. So, fear is part of the cost of venturing. So, of course,
Well,
I've
I
got
think,
fear.
yeah, and I think people are like, fear, courage is acting in the face of fear, like it's all or nothing. And for me, fear is an invitation for self compassion. Like, oh my gosh, you are doing some really new hard things, or
Yep.
um, imposter syndrome. I just get a little frustrated how quick we are to like label things that we shouldn't have to deal with. Like,
Right.
imposter syndrome. When I feel imposter syndrome, I pay attention to it. Not that I feel like I'm not capable, but most of the time for me, imposter syndrome is accurate. I'm not acting authentically. Like, so
Right.
imposter syndrome, people are like, I'm made to feel that by, other people in the world. I'm like, no, when I feel it, I know that I am not speaking up or not speaking my truth. Or so a lot of my
Right.
fear that I've really gotten in tune with, um, has been good direction, a good mile marker, a good like, fear is not something I shouldn't feel. Fear is
Right.
something I just need to pay attention to.
Yeah.
My I have a teacher, and she calls it pay attention to the nostril flare. And I'm like,
Mm.
what? She's like, animals in the woods, you'll watch them, that like they'll get quiet and they'll do a quick nostril flare just to check it and see what they should do next. I'm like,
Huh.
interesting.
That is interesting. Yeah. I'm with you on the imposter syndrome. We love to create syndromes, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
First
We
off,
do.
first off, give me a diagnosis so I can stop thinking about something. And it just is what it is. Now I've got it forever or whatever. So partly, I think to your point, I agree, is that there's a possibility there when I'm feeling like an imposter that I am being one. I'm being
Yeah.
inauthentic. I'm putting on a front. Um, and secondly, usually, I mean, everybody that I work with, that I coach one on one, is running a company, and they're highly leveraged, and they're going after something, and they're doing something they've not done before. So they ought to feel on the edge, like I actually am speaking into the future, something that I don't know if it's going to work, and I don't know if I've got what it takes. That's a healthy humility in my view.
Yeah.
So the part of imposter syndrome is a sign that I'm going after something that's worth it. I mean, I might be going after something that's foolish or whatever, but if people are leveraged and ambitious, you're going to be speaking beyond what you've experienced before, because you're just casting vision, and you're acting sure of something that maybe you're actually 85% sure of this thing, but we're going to do this by the end of the year, and maybe not, but I'm going to throw myself at it as if I am. I think it's natural to feel like an imposter, only because you've set your world up to go take risk, and risk is an
Yeah.
invitation for that. So I also wouldn't just demonize the feelings either. It's just it might be a great sign that I'm in the right place doing the right thing, and therefore, if I relate to that honestly, what happens at the end of that? Then either I need more help from other people, or I need
Yeah.
more help in a spiritual sense. And most of us would rather, we live in this worldview that I get extra credit if I do it on my own.
So
That
true.
so like, everybody that's really successful, usually that's not the first time they've been successful. They've been the head of the class, they've gotten the great grades, they've gotten the championships or whatever. um, and there's some odd, usually pretty crippling, behind the scenes belief system that asking for help is weakness, that having some kind of spiritual practice is a crutch or something negative. I mean, I'm up in the morning and journaling every morning, praying every morning. Why? Because I actually want to be alive beyond my own physical machinery. Meaning, like
Exactly.
my brain's looking for trouble. My brain's looking for shortcuts. My brain's looking to escape pain, escape suffering. That's what my
I
brain's up
love
to.
that.
I don't get a vote on that. But if I'm living heroically or living with valor or courage, I'm going to go after things and show up in a way that actually honors the tension. It's like, even just a silly little example. I've got a 7-year-old girl. They got a 9-year-old boy, 7-year-old girl, couple stepkids, 18 and 16 as well. But it's like this morning, I do this cold plunge out in my backyard, and it just hit me. She's got her own agenda, 7-year-old agenda for how she's going to run her morning. And she wants to go out and play in the cold plunge and take the ice out and all these types of things. And I'm in my head, I'm thinking, we've got 7 minutes to get out of the house before we get off to school. But the courageous point being, the courageous notion in that moment is, am I present enough to like love her well and then guide her towards, or do I want to just be a jerk? I can easily just be a jerk dad and like, you know, um, you know, uh, drill sergeant. That's I could just like whip her in shape, or I can be present with her, realize she's so excited and she wants to go take these big chunks of ice out for whatever reason. That's cool. She wants to do all that. And I can like take on the tension of like being kind and directional at the same time. That's harder than just being directional.
It
Um,
is. And I want to just again, Mark, for listeners, what you're saying is so much beautiful wisdom and brings you into tension. And
yes.
it's the tension that as an adult, we need to manage. And I love, I've not heard it put this way before, and I really love it that our daily habits and practices and dedications, whether it's our meditation, our journaling, our whether it's our cold plunging or our breath work, or whatever any of that is,
Yeah.
helps us live beyond just our physical presence. And
Yes.
I just think that is so important, because I have a lot of people who, at times when I talk to them and they're first sharing, kind of unloading what's on their heart, they either say, I feel dead, or life has gotten meaningless, or it's gotten really boring and one dimensional. And I'm like, well, that makes sense, because you really taken out any three dimensionality or fourth dimensionality, or we want to talk about the fifth dimension. You've really taken that out of your day. And
Yes.
I think a lot of times we see it as leaders like, oh, I know I should meditate, I'd be a more calm leader. And it's like, I wouldn't meditate to be more calm. I think that's, not that big a reward. I would meditate so that I saw the world in 3D with getting less ego hooked. And so I can see just this whole wider view. So
Right on.
um, I love that
Love that.
example, like with your daughter as well. It probably, you had the same 7 minutes to get in the car.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and a lot of times I find staying in that tension, things actually move quicker, or time stretches. I can't determine which is the
Yeah.
case, but yeah,
Yeah.
we want to
Well,
get so
and
directive instead of being with it. I want to mention too. I don't want to interrupt you, but our recent research on resiliency was moving away from this hyper independence. Which a
mhm.
lot of people are hyper independent, but they ignore all the invisible help they got along the way. They just have lack of gratitude. They have more martyred.
Yeah.
But true resilience now is the ability to tap into the genius of the collective. The people that have the highest levels of sustainable resiliency have the largest networks of positive relationships. They don't anchor their confidence in, I'm the smartest one in the room. They anchor their confidence in, collectively, we can figure
Yes.
this out. And they ask for help early and often, which is completely other than what a lot of us have been taught.
For sure. Oh yeah. The pain, I mean, really the pain of, connecting that and the conversation before of, I'm all burnt out. I'm, people that are living that way, and what I would call that, survival, in our work, we talk about the survival needs, which happen to also be strategies, looking good and feeling good and being right and being in control, like our baseline pursuit of those things that we would say we don't get a vote on. That's the gravity of human being: looking good, feeling good, being right, being in control. And obviously, like doing it on my own connects to a lot of those. I get control. I get to look good. I get to feel the way I
Yeah,
want to
it's a
feel.
strategy of lack of
Get to be right.
vulnerability.
Yeah. Yeah. And people are just so, I mean, I'll speak specifically to my clientele, which are all these founders of companies. They go all in on a pair of twos. It's a bad hand, but they just go all in. Like, this is it. I got to really do this, and I'm here to prove something. It's that old. I've heard it more recently. I think it came from the '70s. This idea that people really aren't going after success; they're just really going hard not to be a failure.
Wow. They're playing,
And
it's the old adage, but defense on offense.
that's
Yeah.
right, playing not to
I,
lose versus playing to win. And it's such a quiet and
that's the true
distinct.
form of
It's a
quiet quitting, I think, is quitting
yeah.
on yourself and your hopes and your dreams and how we could make the world better.
Hmm. Yeah, we can see it when I put people through that Harrison assessment, which we'll do. There's a gauge on what they call enthusiastic, which they define as enthusiastic about your own goals. And it's really always enlivening for people when they see that in objective form. Like, how engaged am I really around my own goals? And what do I make up about that? And how have I already decided that that's not going to happen? And I'll try to spend my time acting like that doesn't affect me. But if I don't think that I know that I can for however many years, let's say I've got 4 decades left, like that I'm going to get what I want, then what's going to be the quality of my existence if I'm just saying, okay, I'll just make the best of this crap? Like, which is really what we're doing, like surviving. Let's just get through a Tuesday instead of like, what's here? Like, really,
Yeah.
what's worth? I mean, there's so much that's worth celebrating in the very, very small things.
Yeah.
Obviously, the huge things are easy to see, but even just the small things, like I was out coaching my son's football team, the 9-year old, last night, and the moon was just
Oh,
breathtaking. And it just hit
stunning.
me that it's like I'm here on the field and I've got a son that I love, and he's an athlete, and I grew up an athlete and played sports in high school and college. That's a big part of my family lineage, and I get to be coaching him. That's awesome. And then also it's just this beautiful night and this moon, and like, wow, like let me take a mental picture of this and slow down and like, wow, for all the things that's not going on in the world that I'd like them to, or all the things that are going on that I'd like to stop, this was just right. And
I
that
love it.
the willingness takes some courage to do that, to be grateful despite not getting everything you want. That, I think, that takes courage. Most people believe, and I notice it for myself, that if I'm grateful, it means I'm going to get like contented, like I'm going to get easily satisfied. Um, I keep talking about the Harrison assessment just because it
Which is
shows
the
up in this
and,
conversation.
right? I can be so beautifully grateful for this moment and
Yes,
without expectations, have a wonderful expectancy about some things I want to create.
that's right.
Um,
That's right. And so even for folks, I'm thinking about the listeners right now that might be going through a really hard time. Um, the going through a hard time is a narrative about the situation.
it
So
really
there
is
might
a
be
story.
things that are challenging, like right now, like certain situations at work, certain things you're going through personally, or within yourself, or closely with your nuclear family, or something like that, or difficulties at work. There are those things that are like challenges, that are there. The fact that it's a hard time is my narrative about it. And it seems, and it's this odd thing where we become really loyal to a really crappy story,
Oh my gosh, we
insofar
become
that,
so
like,
loyal to the worst
right
story
on,
ever. And our stress comes from our stories more
right
than
on.
our reality. Because the cool thing
It
about the
is.
present moment, being on the football field, even if you didn't have a job and there's a beautiful moon, is the closer we can get to the moment called now, the more we'll realize we have everything we need. We're completely supported. There's just not one thing wrong in our life in that moment. And if
Right
we
on.
want, stress, we got to get a future. If we want shame, we got to get a past. But we get so committed to those narratives. And I loved what you said, knowing that my brain evolutionarily is developed to like work against me in so many ways. If I don't have
Yes.
offsetting practices to offset that knowledge I have about how my mind works, I'm
Yes.
going to get tied to some really crappy narratives, and then that becomes really a co-creation act.
Right on. I mean, my brain, as far as how I look at it, like my brain is wired to preserve me.
Yeah.
right? Like I'm here to look out for trouble,
And that's
here
not
to
my
look
only
out for
goal, but
threats.
it's
Right. Well, I mean, just saying, like that's the baseline. But if you just do that, then you'll become so normal. And normal meaning like what everybody else is doing, which is like having all these chronic complaints about things and setting up their lives actually to not work out too well, and then complaining about it and getting all the sympathy for it and all the things we, not the first person to call those rackets, where we've got this chronic complaint and a system of behavior that keeps the complaint alive. And then, we have all this pain, all these prices we pay for that living that way, but we have all these very hidden payoffs to the complaints. Otherwise, we do something else.
we
But we
would.
like
There are
complaint.
big
We like
payoffs.
complaining. Yeah,
And
well, we
there's
like
almost from the
complaining.
time of race, there's like this religion of suffering. If we go with our
Yes.
conditioning, the safest way, but the most probably for me, least pleasant way to go through life is joining that religion, of suffering. And I've really noticed that at different points in my personal life and my professional life, not being willing to participate in that
Right.
um, does shake some things up.
Yes.
And you've got to get really good at impermanence and allowing what falls away to like fall away.
Right.
But it's interesting because I think we really get tied to that narrative, as you're saying, and we're not even sure that we're in it. And I teach people a lot about editing the story and getting in higher levels of consciousness before you engage with others,
Hmm.
because a lot of our stories are about judgment of others, and we need to get
Yes.
into compassion and curiosity. But what I love about what you just brought up is I'm not sure I talk to listeners enough about looking at the stories, the narrative that you've gotten tied to about your own personal life.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I went through this because for the longest time, like I was admired for what I had accomplished in my life, considering my circumstances, or I had gone through some really horrific things in my marriage and my relationship, and I was like single girl who'd been betrayed, or single girl who had raised four boys in spite of. And then one day it just hit me. I'm like, I don't want the narrative. I just want to be like happy girl walking amongst the cactuses. and
Yeah.
and that started me on really looking at the narrative that I had gotten a lot out of and that other people had given to me.
Yeah.
And it changed my whole interaction with people. People, we get together and they're like, who are you? And hardly any of what I have to give folks is my past, is
Hmm.
like what I've overcome. I'm like blessed, happy person sitting across the table from you. What cool things are happening in your life. And I
Right
think a
on.
lot of us have these big identities, these narratives we carry with us. Even as a leader, like I ask people often, like, what do you need to let go of today at work to
Hmm.
um, to like be here joyfully? Because some people are like, I was the person passed up for promotion, or I was the person who like, and it was like 8 years ago. It's like, you know,
Yeah. When they carry it around like a curse. I mean, that's why. So we do almost all of our works in house in companies, which we love doing. Um, and then 3-4 times a year, we put on what we call the Revenant process, which is a 4-day personal leadership accelerant.
oh,
And
cool,
it's really great. You'd love it. We actually have one coming up at the end of October. This one's in Hawaii. We're just Waikiki Beach, just south of
nice place. If you're gonna have some
it's
self reflection.
such a suffering. Don't come. It's just so hard. Um, and but one of the major games there, or major pushes there, is to help illuminate all of these ideas, these beliefs that are currently governing our lives. We don't know they are because we're so in it. And if we can get some space and like watch and see these narratives we're living in, if we see them and then can own them, and then we can govern them and we can shift, and like, let's a new choice. So what, now what, we say all the time. Like, so
I
that
love that.
happened. Okay, so what now? What are we going to do? Like, from up until now it's been this way, and now from now on it's been that way. And people have, I mean, that is the language of epiphany, right? It's like, I can see now I can see now what's been the current that's been pushing my life through, some that we've chosen, a lot of which culturally that just kind of flow through culture. And people get really tied into victim stories. They don't know it because it's so common. And if you decide to reject the victim story, you might actually get rejected because you naturally become a threat to an interpersonal system that share complaints, i.e., gossip or just slanderous behavior, or just kind of the woe is meing Eeyoreness for a lot of people. It's like, oh, this is so hard and so bad. I can't believe this is happening to me. Blah blah blah. That's so normal that if
It's
you just
so
say,
normal. Brene
yeah,
Brown calls it cheap bonding. Like we bond
yeah,
through this
that's right.
suffering that isn't real. That's the hardest part, is like we're also bonding in illusion, or other people go into like toxic positivity where
Yes,
it's like it's also not real, but they, pressure themselves to like see the blessing in every moment. And for me, it's
right.
like seeing what I believe about the moment just isn't even real. Like the liberation doesn't come from seeing the positive in a negative. It doesn't come from, living in the negative. I think it comes from seeing, so much of what you thought just happened never really did.
Yes. Sure. And I mean, I think for me, the conversation around the revenant process is really helping people get really clear about their stand, like who they are, despite circumstances. My business partner Dan Tacchini, who's probably the best leadership trainer in the world, in my experience, um, he's got this saying where he says, "A person with a vision can never be held hostage by circumstance."
I love that. We
And
talk about
so,
succeed in spite of your circumstances aren't the reasons you can't succeed. They're the reality in which you must,
right,
if you're gonna.
right on.
So true.
So,
So
really,
yeah,
really
go ahead. This
breathtaking.
is fascinating. We are talking about moving beyond the ego and pushing past fears, and
Yeah.
so much of I'd like to get back to, because I know we need to. I love the work on honoring the fear. Um, what advice, counsel, or philosophy do you have about like pushing beyond fear? Like many times, people feel like they're up against some door they can't walk through. And sometimes the perfect metaphor is like, I was waiting for somebody to open it and I realized that the doorknob was on the inside. Other people don't want to walk through because of what they'll leave behind. Other people just spend a lot of lifetimes like at that threshold and then backing away. Um, do you have kind of
Yeah.
common things you
Well,
see in people, or common, or some great suggestions on the work to be done to move through?
first off, I don't think it's really possible to get beyond fear.
I
And
would agree.
I definitely don't think it's necessary. I think it's part of the shtick. Like if I think that once I'm not scared, then I will. That's part of the racket. Like I would say that's really, setting up the world in a way that I don't take any action and I'm justified. And
Yeah, a
so,
lot of people resist change this way. They're like, you haven't given me a certain plan, so I can't lean into this, like, until you've removed all risk and fear for me. And I'm like,
right on.
that's probably not going to happen.
No, it's never gonna happen. Because if even if the thing gets solved, like I'm scared about X and X gets solved, well, Y is coming, and I'm got concerned about that as well. So we always like talk about fear as like something you're just gonna carry with you, and it's so as I'm moving on to the next thing, I'm gonna have more fears and more concerns and more things to battle, and that's just a part of it. And sometimes as people are going down this road and facing their own challenges, they end up using fear to justify their poor behavior, or
Hmm.
justify their own pathologies, or justify their own their we have a saying in our work that all of us are criminals and some of us are just more arrestable than others. We used to work in the prison system, so that worked when you're
Yeah,
working with lifers.
so
um,
true.
but same idea. I mean, there's not any more criminality behind the bars of Soledad State Prison than there is in the boardroom. As far as people's, I talk criminality like the behaviors and strategies that we know all criminals use. There's like 18 strategies that all criminals use, and it's
That all
very
humans
similar.
use.
All humans use, if they had a gun in their hand or not, or a pen, it's the same thinking and it's the same behavior, and they'll get away with it because they know how to look and know how to talk and
And
aren't,
have some privilege. And Byron Katie used to say, all of us are capable of any crime we abhor if we're believing our own thinking. People are like, how could they murder that person? It's like, if you
Right.
believed your own thinking, you could justify, murder. We're
Sure.
not beyond this condition.
No, never. Peterson talks about that a lot. I forget which book. He always talks about this one book. Maybe it's called Ordinary Criminals or something. But anyway, it's around um, officers in the Nazi army and how they were like normal guys. And then all of a sudden, fast forward 2 years, and they're doing really heinous acts, and how anybody could get to that point. It doesn't take much that we all could find our way down the slippery slope into horrible behavior, we'd call it. But it becomes really normative, especially if you're in that context and it becomes normal and there's pressure to do so. And it just takes a couple shifts in order to make this justifiable and okay. I guess my point here being is that whenever we have those thoughts that we don't want to have, and we have those behaviors that we don't want to have, and have those, tendencies we'd rather people not look and see, we borrow from the Desert Fathers the spiritual concept of what we call hugging the cactus, where it's like there's this thing that I don't want to see, don't want to believe, don't want to, show in my behavior, but that's the thing. That's the
That's the thing.
cactus
That's your
that you must
shadow. That's the
embrace.
beautiful
Yeah, that's
shadow.
right. Jungian view where it's
I
like,
love
hey,
that, hugging the cactus.
if you can't integrate your dark side, then you're really the most dangerous person. I love, I'm really good at finding people's dark side and bringing it to the light, and let's have a conversation about it without morality. Let's just talk about it so that you spend much less of your life trying to avoid it.
Exactly.
Because
All
if
things
you
are
can
welcome. And that's
integrate,
part of integration, whether it's internal
right,
family systems or it's like, is that a protector that needs to be welcomed but unburdened? And which is why the offsetting practices and dedications we do, such as, meditation or reflection or prayer or spiritual frameworks, um, is so
right on.
important because fear can really be the work of the ego. And the ego always is we're the victim and we had to welcoming our shadow in is, I'm very tempted to do this. And I've got something bigger that I want to ascribe to. And for me, that's a
Mm-hmm.
big way out of fear. I saw this, when I had my kids, like I would be afraid of, as a single mom, it's so silly now, but I would be afraid of like somebody coming into our house and hurting us. But the minute I
Sure.
heard that, I was more than willing to go out in the dark and take on whatever it was because my love for my children was
Mm-hmm.
bigger than my fear. And so part of what gets me through fear is I do a lot more like physical risk taking and
Yes.
backpacking solo and things I never would have done before, especially now I'm in my age group. It's like I start to focus on the potential, no guaranteed outcomes, is so much bigger than staying
Mm-hmm.
safe in the moment. And
Right on.
I think that fits in a lot with your philosophy about,
It does. I use the metaphor often where it's like, if no one will do the climb unless they want what's on the other side. And most of us spend a lot of time looking at the steep climb and how hard it's going to be and how I ought not have to do it and who's not helping and who blah, 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 all that narrative instead of saying, okay, what do I really want? What's on the other side of this mountain that's worth the suffering in the sense that I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to, ask for a bunch of help, which is suffering for a lot of people because they, will have to show their incompetency or their naivete or their lack of experience or something. But if I'm clear on what's worth it, then all of a sudden it reframes what's in front of me. Right. So we all will always say like we're always living into the future we see coming.
I love
So
that.
if I have a very despairing view of the future, then nothing's really worth it. Of course I'll be
Yeah,
depressed. Of course I'll be in despair. If I don't think anything's going to work out, if I'm in that narrative, then you're going to inherit the conversation of that narrative. Like that will be your milieu, that will be your environment. And but if I do think the future is going to work out and I am clear about what's worth putting myself at risk, you know, enrolling a team, all those types of things, then I'm going to step forward. And all of a sudden, like if my future shifts, because I shift, right? Because like I become what I'm thinking, I become what I'm committed to. We're very Adlerian in our view, like the teleological view. Like I am what I'm committed to versus the Freudian etiological view. I am I am the effect of my history, so I prefer a future-based look.
I do
Obviously, I'm a
too.
coach.
More positive
And
psychology based.
well, yeah, it's and it gives a lot more space for the grand adventure in life versus this kind of nihilistic, I live in this little box and my history and my family of origin stuff set the box for me, or my genetics or my blah
Yeah.
blah blah set the box for me. And I just got to enjoy this time in this really crappy prison cell. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's like learned helplessness.
that's right. And you can do that, and people do that all the time. They don't know they're doing it. They just call that life. But if you get around someone or hire a coach or something that is not committed to your story about it and is actually committed to vitality for you and what's possible for you, that'll be a very big threat immediately because they're not co-signing on your bullshit story. Number
Yes.
one. Number two is they'll call you into courage. And so it'll be like, okay, you're scared. Well, that might be a great indicator. You lean in. That's what I tell myself all the time. If I'm scared, I'm in the perfect place. It's time to lean in, and I'm greater than any of my circumstances. And we'll see if that's so, but that's like a commitment I live from. It's like, okay, whatever I'm facing, whatever I'm scared of, usually for me, I always need a lot more help than I want. I know that's true for me. I need a lot more help than I want, meaning like I'm one of those types that's like, I'd rather do it on my own. I can take this on my own. I've got what it takes, all this I type stuff. That's baked in there. It doesn't have to go away. But if I'm committed to thriving, I'm going to ask for a lot more help than I'd prefer to need.
I
And
love
actually, my
this.
life gets so much quicker. My life moves faster. Stress goes away. So when I see other people as resources versus this kind of competitive dog eat dog, I better look this way, all the ego based conversations. If I see everyone as a resource, I mean, if you're a type A leader right now listening to this, if you're not asking for, I mean, here's a challenge invitation for you.
Good.
Find some way to ask for help every single day.
Oh, I love that
Now,
because I always
that
give an
might,
assignment to my listeners. And I think
yes,
all of us, because we're so used to, I'll do it myself, or this craziness, like, I don't want to ask other people to do what I'm not willing to do. Like, there's so much hyper independence. So that's your
yes,
assignment, listeners, is every day find a way g- genuinely that you can enlist somebody else's help. And I want to mark too what you said about coaching, because I think it's so important. Because for a while, it's like everybody had a coach, and the coaching goals were so boring. They're like, I can coach
yeah,
you on how to get your promotion, or I can coach you on how to be less burned out at work, or I can coach you how to be better at manipulating others at work. And I'm like, that's not coaching. A coach
yeah,
relationship is someone who is able to see beyond your conditioning and really help you
hmm,
question through
yes,
questions and
yes,
self-reflection. But I love what you said. They're keenly interested in your thriving,
yes,
and they just aren't willing to co-conspire with you. The big thick plot conspiracy thing.
yeah,
Um, and that's why I think coaches are so questions. If you want different answers in your life, you've got to get with people that will help you ask different questions. And a lot of people come to me, and I don't do a lot of coaching. I coach when we're heavily involved in the organization, but I
hmm,
don't do one-off coaching very much. But a lot of people come to me and they're like, like, should I stay? Should I go? Like, they want to make a career decision. And I'm like, horrible question. Should. It's all about
yeah,
conditioning external. Stay or go. Pretty extreme. There's probably 1,000
right,
different options. And
yes,
then it's so conditional. I had a great week at work, so I'm just going to stay. Or I had a bad weekend with my spouse, I'm going to leave. And I'm like, what if you started with different questions? What does
right
my
on,
soul crave? Is a great
hmm,
question.
hmm,
And once I know that, how can I advocate for that in my everyday life? I don't have to change my job. I don't have to change my spouse. Like, how can I advocate for that? And like, what am I afraid of? And, how do I move through or with or welcome some of that fear? And I think coaches do that. I love coaching. For all the coaches in my life have really just said, stop, Sai, when did you decide that? And how do you know
yes,
that's true? And
right,
like, how does that serve you?
right, yeah. I mean, you use the word we use all the time. So I always warn potential clients. I just let them know where I'm coming from and what I'm up to, which they don't get a vote on what I'm up to. They can decide not to work with me. That's great. But if we're going to
I
work
love that.
together, where I'm at is I'm a fierce advocate for them. Advocate along the lines of what we've been talking about, that I'm going to see with hypercolor, probably more than they will, around the future that's possible, what they really want. And then I'm fierce in the way, fierce, and it's a little bit of a subjective term, obviously, but usually what's needed, especially working with adults, is we're so ingrained. And so we need someone that loves us enough to tell us the truth, or at least to ask the most truthful question, to your point. And like, and not be tied into the soap opera, not be tied into the narrative and all of the inevitability of their previous belief
Yeah, the
system. And like,
predetermined outcome that isn't really
yeah, that's right.
predetermined.
And what, and those types of questions, does it have to be that way? I mean, I love, you mentioned Byron Katie, what simple and beauty in her work, right? Those four
Life
questions,
changing
which
for me.
life changing, because we become our thinking, and she's great at just questioning it very Socratically around,
She is thinking.
is it true, or is it absolutely true, and who do I become with that thought, and all that, like, who would I. And so our our work with folks is deep advocacy work, which is kind of the through line for me. Being at the bedside, or being a pastor for
Yeah.
many years, or
Because in a
doing this
nursing
work,
role, I
which,
mean, patient advocacy is the number one role that,
yeah,
nurses take oaths about. And I love your
right
word
on.
fierce, because it's loving bravery. I love that. It's great. Unfortunately, I probably have to draw this great conversation to a close. Um, and I'm so appreciative, Adrian. I knew this would be a great discussion, but it's been a lovely discussion. And I
Hmm.
know that so many people are going to want to know more about you, more about your organization. I know you're in partnership with some
Sure.
others. So, name wise, Adrian Koehler, it's Koehler.
You
And
got
I'm
it.
going to let Adrian talk about how to find him. Like, can you imagine what great
Sure.
coaching?
Oh, that's kind. Yeah, if anybody wants to connect, I'd love to connect. That's one of the main reasons I do this, is to connect with as many people, you know, in a land full of zombies. I'm looking for the live ones, right? So, if anybody wants to connect, would love it. And it's not that people are the world's that amoral. It's really just more dead than anything else. Like, we've given up.
Yeah.
So for folks that already know that they're committed to something beyond even any of those previous definitions, that's great. Love to have a conversation with you. You can find me on Instagram. That's an easy place. Adrian.k is my handle there. The
Perfect.
firm you're talking about, takenewground.com. So you can go check that out. And we're pretty, you'll see our style.
I can't wait. And you've got
Great.
some great ebooks too, right?
We do. We have one that we easily send out to folks called the Change Imperative, which is our view on change management, from a very human, relational side. I mean, people love to talk about mechanisms and strategies and formulas and frameworks, and that's great. At the end of the day, though, it's a human endeavor, and so we really get behind the scenes. I mean, a couple things. So if you want to hear about that, you can go. And we have a podcast, which you alluded to earlier, called the Naked Leadership Podcast, because great leadership is vulnerable.
Love
And
that.
so come check us out over there, where we talk through really the behind the scenes conversations that are usually generating most of the dilemmas, and then how to illuminate the right things, and how to get the conversations that are under the table on the table, so we can actually deal with reality. And then I'll just give a quick pitch for, if you're into this kind of work and want your own smelling salts experience, your own fresh, skydiving experience, all metaphorically speaking. We've got that Revenant process coming up, 4 days in Hawaii. It'll be 40 people. It's filling up quickly, with our clients and other like minded folks. I went through this training 15 years ago. We did a recent survey of 2,000 people that have come through it, and 97% of them said it's one of the top three experiences of their life. So
Wow.
maybe you want to go check it out. That's wearerevenant.com. Just, you can message me on Instagram. I'll send you the link. But We Are Revenant, like to come back from, wearerevenant.com. And then we've got a thing in Italy. It's called Icon. It's for folks that are successful, people that have made it with a recent exit or on their way towards an exit, and really want to be thinking about how to set their world up so that success isn't a problem, which that's most people's experience once they finally hit hit the goal. score the touchdown, whatever, they're in crisis because they haven't set their world up in order to kind of make that transition into success. So that's really what that conversation's about. It'll be in on Lake Garda in Tuscany, so that's also very rough, obviously, for people. But that's going to be early November. So we've got a couple opportunities. I didn't ask when this one's airing, but if you're interested in any of those things, just hit me up and we'll talk. Or if you've got organizational issues, we do all this work inside several, dozens of companies. So we love this work, and
Perfect.
if we'll see rather quickly if it's a right fit.
Yeah.
So love to
And I'll
connect with
put some of
anybody.
this in the show notes too. And I love having colleagues like you out there where there's alignment and validation between our philosophies, um, because the type of work that you're able to do with consulting and coaching
Hmm.
is just not the type of work that we do. So we need lots of, not that that matters. There's plenty of work to go around.
Sure.
But I'll
Right
put
on.
in the show notes too about the conference and some of that
Yeah.
too, so people can see the link. It's been,
Awesome.
yeah, such a pleasure, such a beautiful pleasure to talk with you. And I hope we really have spiked people's curiosity to check out your podcast. And what I'm loving about life right now, I have to admit, about 20 years ago, it was a little lonely out there talking to people about some of the topics that we've talked about. And probably, I don't want that to be a limiting belief. I probably just hadn't asked for help and found some of my people. But right now in this world, there's so many points of validation, not to say we're right, but to say, if you want to see the moon, look that way. And there's a lot of
Hmm.
beautiful pointers out right now. Whatever resonates with you, you don't find your guru. It's not how it works. Find a connection with some people that will help you, move to your next point of evolution. They're the the waypoints, and I think
Right
that
on.
is really exciting. So
Yeah, and I'll just add to that with my thanks, by the way. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate you. Love this work. Can't wait to get more connected. And just for folks listening, it's life's short, and we know that, and it's worth it. So whatever your soul's telling you, whatever it might be a muted voice about what's worth going after. It's worth it. Like the life you want, the impact you want to make, it's really worth it. Otherwise, what do we have? We've got regrets. And so, anyway, my deep invitation to everybody is like, whatever that leap is, whether it's sending a message to me and my team or just whatever you're going to do out there, just go ahead.
yeah,
It's today's your day. Just do it.
it is. Life rewards the brave. Like,
Amen.
I continue to look back and just pinch myself on how beautiful life is after some
Yes.
seeming challenges. And it's like, life rewards the brave. It's such a sweet
Yes.
payoff, such a sweet
Yes.
payoff. So,
Awesome. Sai, great
okay.
to be with you.
Thank you so much, Adrian.